They mourned the lost dragon hatchlings, then saw them asleep on the human's chest. The crystalline towers of Drathos Prime shimmered under the light of twin suns. But today, their brilliance seemed muted. The entire city had fallen into mourning. In the grand hatching chamber, Ambassador Velrak stood with his crest lowered, his scales dulled with grief. Around him, the Draken Council members keened softly, a sound that resonated through the cavernous space like distant thunder. "The hatchlings are gone," High Mother Sareth whispered, her voice breaking. 3 days they have been missing. Without warmth, without sustenance, they cannot survive. The Draken were an ancient race, older than most civilizations in the Galactic Union. They were dragons in form, massive, intelligent, and fierce. But they were also dying. For generations, fewer and fewer eggs had hatched successfully. Each clutch was precious, each hatchling a hope for their dwindling species. And now 6 hatchlings from the royal clutch had vanished without a trace. Security recordings showed nothing. The environmental seals were intact. It was as if the hatchlings had simply ceased to exist. "We must face the truth," Velrak said heavily. "They are lost." At that moment, Strom burst through the chamber doors, his boots echoing on the polished stone. The human engineer was disheveled, his hair sticking up at odd angles, and he was breathing hard as if he'd been running. "Wait," he shouted. Don't start the funeral rites yet." The council members turned as one, their golden eyes fixing on the small human with a mixture of hope and irritation. Humans were new to the Galactic Union, barely 2 centuries since first contact. They were clever with machines and frustratingly reckless, but they knew nothing of Draken traditions. "Human Strom," Velrak said with forced patience, "we appreciate your concern, but this is not—" "I found them," Strom interrupted, then winced. "Well, technically, Zoe found them. She's with them now." The chamber erupted. High Mother Sareth lunged forward with surprising speed, her massive form suddenly looming over Strom. "Where?" "Take us now!" Strom held up his hands. Okay, but you need to stay calm. They're safe, but the situation is unusual." He led them through the corridors at a run, the Draken having to fold their wings tight to fit through passageways designed for smaller species. They reached the human quarters, a modest section of the diplomatic wing, and Strom palmed the door open, gesturing for silence. Inside, the lights were dimmed. Zoe, the human xenobiologist, sat cross-legged on the floor beside a large bed. She looked up as they entered, putting a finger to her lips. "Quietly," she whispered. "They just fell asleep." High Mother Sareth stepped forward, and then froze. On the bed, curled on a nest of blankets and what appeared to be human clothing, were the 6 missing hatchlings. Each was no larger than a house cat, their scales gleaming softly in shades of copper, gold, and deep crimson. They were fast asleep, their tiny chests rising and falling in perfect rhythm. But that wasn't what made every Draken in the room stop breathing. Sprawled on the bed, snoring softly, was another human, one of the maintenance crew based on his worn jumpsuit. And nestled against his chest, tucked under his arm, and even draped across his stomach were the hatchlings. They clung to him like he was their mother, their small claws carefully retracted, their tails wrapped around his limbs. "What?" Velrax couldn't find words. "How?" Zoe stood slowly, moving with careful precision. 3 days ago, we found the first one in the ventilation system. It had crawled through the ducts and ended up in crew quarters. "Martinez here." She gestured to the sleeping human. "Found it on his pillow when he got off shift. He thought it was dying from cold, so he tucked it against his chest to warm it up." By morning, 2 more had found their way into his room. By the second night, all 6 were here, but why? High Mother Sareth breathed. "Why would they leave the hatching chamber?" Strom exchanged a glance with Zoe. "We ran some tests. Well, non-invasive ones. We weren't going to risk disturbing them. Zoe, you want to explain?" The xenobiologist nodded. "The hatching chamber maintains perfect temperature, perfect humidity, perfect everything according to Draken physiology. But here's the thing. The hatchlings weren't looking for perfect conditions. They were looking for something else." She pulled out a data pad displaying thermal imaging. "Humans run hot, warmer than most species. Our average body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius. But more than that, we produce something the environment systems can't replicate." "What?" Velrax asked. "Heartbeats," Zoe said softly. "Breathing. Micro-vibrations. the sound and feel of a living being. In nature, Draken hatchlings would have been surrounded by these cues from their parents. Modern hatching chambers are so efficient, so sterile, that they've eliminated all of that. High Mother Sareth moved closer to the bed, her massive head lowering to observe the sleeping pile of human and hatchlings. One of the babies stirred, making a tiny chirping sound, and Martinez's hand unconsciously moved to gently pat its back. The hatchling settled immediately, nuzzling deeper against his warmth. They imprinted on him, Sareth said, wonder filling her voice. Not quite, Zoe corrected gently. They bonded with him. There's a difference. Draken hatchlings are smarter than we thought. They knew they needed something and they went searching for it. They found Martinez, probably because his quarters are closest to the maintenance ducts. And she smiled, he just did what humans do. He saw something small and vulnerable, and his instinct was to protect it. Felrax shook his head slowly. For 3 days we searched everywhere. We mourned, and they were here sleeping on a human. To be fair, Strom said, we only figured it out yesterday. Zoe noticed Martinez hadn't shown up for his shifts, and we got worried. Found him here, wouldn't leave, said the babies needed him. Guy hasn't slept more than a few hours in 3 days because he's been afraid to move. As if summoned by the discussion, Martinez stirred. His eyes fluttered open, immediately focusing on the hatchlings. When he saw the room full of massive dragons, he froze. Ah, he croaked. I can explain. High Mother Sareth did something no one expected. She laughed, a deep rumbling sound that shook the room. The hatchlings stirred at the noise, 6 tiny heads popping up, looking around with curious golden eyes. They saw the adult Draken and chirped excitedly but made no move to leave their human. No explanation needed, human Martinez, Sareth said warmly. You have done what our technology could not. You gave them life. She bowed her massive head. The Draken people are in your debt. Martinez blinked. They were cold? Zoe laughed. That's humanity in a nutshell. Over the following weeks, the discovery sparked a revolution in Draken childcare. Hatcheries were redesigned with warmth companions, living attendants who could provide the biological cues the hatchlings needed. Humans, with their warm bodies and protective instincts, became highly sought after as hatchling caregivers. Martinez found himself the subject of a documentary and the honorary godfather to 6 dragon hatchlings who, even as they grew larger, would still try to curl up on his chest. And in the Galactic Union, they told a new story about humans, how they had saved a dying species not with technology or weapons, but with something far simpler, warmth, compassion, and the instinct to protect something small that needed them. Because that, more than anything, was what made humanity remarkable. End.